Whispers from the screen in a city that never slept, where the neon lights flickered like dying stars. There stood an apartment complex that had seen better days. The paint on the walls was peeling, and the hallways echoed with the footsteps of ghosts long forgotten. Among these aging structures was a small unit on the 5th floor, its windows boarded up, casting shadows that danced eerily against the flickering streetlights below. Inside this apartment lived Clara, a reclusive woman in her 30s who had traded human interaction for the companionship of technology. Her life revolved around her job as a software developer, crafting code that breathed life into machines. However, the lines between her digital world and reality began to blur when she purchased an old smart television at a local pawn shop. The TV was an outdated model, its screen slightly cracked and its edges frayed. But it was cheap, and Clara thought it could serve as a distraction from her lonely existence. She set it up in her living room, connecting it to her Wi-Fi network, and settled into her usual routine of binge-watching shows late into the night. At first, everything seemed normal. The TV flickered to life with the familiar glow of streaming services, filling the silence of the apartment with laughter and drama. But as days turned into weeks, Clara began to notice something strange. The television would occasionally switch channels on its own, landing on static-filled broadcasts or eerie infomercials for products that didn't exist. The sound was always low, almost like a whisper, but she brushed it off as a glitch in the system. One evening, while watching a particularly gripping thriller, Clara heard a faint voice coming from the television. It was barely audible over the dialogue of the show, but it was there, soft and persistent, like a distant echo. She leaned closer to the screen, straining to catch the words. "Help me find me," it seemed to say. Clara's heart raced as she dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks on her. But the whispers grew louder over the following nights. They became a constant companion, weaving in and out of her consciousness like a haunting melody. "Clara, Clara," they called, luring her deeper into their web. She found herself talking back to the screen, asking questions, seeking answers. The television responded with static bursts and flickers of light, as if acknowledging her presence. One night, after a particularly long day at work, Clara fell asleep on the couch with the TV still on. She was jolted awake by a loud crackling noise. The screen displayed a grainy image of an empty room, her room filled with shadows that twisted and writhed in unnatural shapes. The whispers crescendoed into frantic cries. "Clara, you must listen. They're coming for you." Panic surged through her veins as she scrambled to turn off the TV. But the remote slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. The screen flickered again, now showing distorted faces pressed against the glass, their mouths moving in silent screams. Clara stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel their desperation clawing at her sanity. Determined to rid herself of this nightmare, Clara unplugged the television and shoved it into a corner of the room. But even without power, she could still hear them whispers echoing in her mind during the day and haunting her dreams at night. Each morning she awoke more exhausted than before, drained by the relentless voices that had taken residence in her thoughts. Days turned into weeks, and Clara became a shell of her former self. Her work suffered. Colleagues noticed her erratic behavior and whispered behind her back. She stopped answering calls and texts, retreating further into her isolation. The apartment felt like a prison, each corner echoing with the taunts of the unseen entities that had invaded her life. One evening, desperate for answers, Clara decided to investigate the origins of her haunted television. She scoured online forums and dark websites for any mention of similar experiences. To her horror, she stumbled upon stories of others who had encountered devices that whispered secrets from beyond a phenomenon known as the echo. These devices were said to be conduits for lost souls or malevolent spirits seeking revenge or recognition. Clara's hands trembled as she read accounts of people who had become obsessed with their televisions, drawn into a world where reality blurred with fiction, until they could no longer discern one from the other. Some had vanished without a trace, others were found wandering the streets in a daze, muttering incoherently about messages from the screen. As paranoia gripped her mind, Clara decided to confront the whispers directly. She plugged the television back in and sat before it, trembling with fear but fueled by a desperate need for closure. "What do you want from me?" she shouted into the void. The screen flickered violently before settling on a familiar static-filled channel. The whispers morphed into distinct voices, some pleading, others angry, each vying for her attention. "Help us. You can't leave us here," they cried in unison. Clara felt an icy chill creep down her spine as she realized these were not just random voices. They were echoes of those who had once lived, people who had suffered and died in this very building. Their stories were woven into the fabric of her apartment, trapped within its walls and now spilling out through the screen. "Why me?" she whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "Because you're like us," one voice replied softly, breaking through the chaos. "You're alone just like we were." The realization hit Clara like a freight train. She had spent years isolating herself from others, building walls around her heart to protect herself from pain and rejection. But now she understood that this loneliness had made her vulnerable to whatever dark forces lingered within her apartment. In that moment of clarity, Clara felt an overwhelming urge to help these lost souls find peace. "What do I need to do?" she asked, determination igniting within her. "Find us," they whispered back urgently. "You must uncover our stories, set us free." With newfound resolve, Clara began to research the history of her building and its inhabitants. She scoured public records and old newspaper articles, piecing together fragments of lives that had been lost to time. Each story resonated within her, soul tales of love and loss, betrayal and redemption, echoes of humanity that transcended death itself. But as she delved deeper into these histories, she began to notice something unsettling. The more she learned about those who had lived in her apartment complex, the more connected she felt to their tragedies. Their pain seeped into her consciousness like ink on paper, staining her thoughts with darkness. One night, while poring over dusty archives in a local library, Clara stumbled upon an article about a tragic fire that had swept through the building decades ago. A blaze that claimed many lives and left families shattered. Among them was a young girl named Lily who had been trapped inside during the inferno. Clara's heart sank as she read Lily's story, a bright child with dreams of becoming an artist, who had perished too soon. The whispers in her apartment grew louder, as if urging Clara to acknowledge this lost soul's presence. "Lily!" Clara called out tentatively into the silence of her home. The television flickered to life once more, illuminating the room with an otherworldly glow. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, a child's voice filled with sorrow yet tinged with hope. "Help me find my family." Tears streamed down Clara's face as she realized what she needed to do. She had to honor Lily's memory by finding out what happened to her family. After the fire, did they survive? Did they mourn? Did they ever know what happened to their beloved daughter? Driven by purpose, Clara embarked on a mission to uncover the truth about Lily's family. She visited local archives and contacted historical societies, piecing together fragments of information like a puzzle waiting to be solved. But as she dug deeper into Lily's past, strange occurrences began to plague Clara's apartment once again. Objects moved when she wasn't looking, shadows flitted across her peripheral vision, and every night brought new whispers that filled her with dread. "Leave us alone," Clara shouted one night after hearing another chilling cry from the television. But instead of retreating into silence, the whispers grew louder, angrier, until they echoed through every corner of her apartment, like a storm brewing on the horizon. "Help us!" they screamed in unison. The air grew heavy with despair as Clara realized that by trying to help one lost soul, She had awakened something far more sinister, lurking within those walls of darkness, that thrived on fear and desperation. Days turned into nights filled with terror as Clara fought against forces beyond her comprehension. The television became a portal for nightmares each time she turned it on. She was thrust into visions of suffering souls trapped between worlds, lost and longing for release, desperate for answers, yet terrified of what lay ahead. Clara sought guidance from an old friend who dabbled in paranormal research. Together they conducted rituals meant to cleanse spaces tainted by tragedy. But nothing seemed to quell the unrest brewing within Clara's home. With each failed attempt at banishment came new revelations about Lily's family, a mother who never stopped searching for her daughter and a father consumed by grief so profound he turned to drink for solace after losing everything he held dear. Clara felt their pain resonate deep within herself, a mirror reflecting back all that she had tried so hard to escape, loneliness wrapped in layers of regret, memories buried beneath years of silence, love lost amid chaos. As she uncovered more about Lily's family history, their struggles after tragedy struck, Clara realized that perhaps they weren't just lost souls seeking closure. Perhaps they were mirrors reflecting parts of herself she had long ignored, the very essence of humanity intertwined with darkness and light. But just when Clara thought she might break through this cycle of despair by honoring Lily's memory, something shifted within her apartment. Once again, a palpable tension thickening the air, like fog rolling in off an unseen ocean. The television erupted into chaos, a cacophony of voices clamoring for attention. As images flashed across its screen, scenes from Lily's life juxtaposed with horror-filled moments from other tragedies throughout history, all woven together in a tapestry depicting loss upon loss until it became unbearable. "Help us! You have to help us!" they cried out desperately, as if trying to drown out their own fears, while dragging Clara down into their depths, where hope flickered dimly like candlelight, fighting against an encroaching storm. And then came silence, a deafening stillness enveloping everything around Clara, as if time itself held its breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. Clara sat frozen before the screen, her heart racing wildly while dread coiled tightly around every thought, threatening to consume her whole. But deep down inside flickered something else, resolve mixed with compassion, born from understanding, the realization that healing wasn't just about setting others free, it was also about confronting one's demons head-on, even when faced with unimaginable darkness, as shadows danced along walls painted by flickering light, casting eerie shapes across surfaces. Clara knew this battle wasn't just hers alone anymore. It belonged equally to those who had come before, to those who still sought redemption amid chaos, to those whose stories intertwined with hers forevermore. And so began an uncharted journey fraught with uncertainty, yet illuminated by courage, a quest not merely for freedom, but for connection, forged through shared pain and odyssey, where whispers transformed into echoes filled with promise, waiting patiently beneath layers upon layers, yearning finally be heard once more. Whispers from the screen, the resolution as Clara sat in the dim light of her apartment. The echoes of lost souls swirled around her like a tempest. The television flickered erratically, casting ghostly shadows that danced along the walls, each whisper a reminder of the tragic stories that had intertwined with her own. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Lily," she called out softly, her voice trembling yet resolute. "I'm here to help you. I won't abandon you." The screen flickered again, revealing images of Lily's childhood, her laughter, her art, and the love she had for her family. Clara felt a pang of sorrow for the girl who had never had the chance to grow up, to fulfill her dreams. "Tell me what you need," Clara urged, her heart aching with empathy. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, clearer now than ever before. "Find my mother. She needs to know I'm still here. Help her remember me." With renewed determination, Clara set out to locate Lily's mother. She scoured local records and reached out to community centers, piecing together the remnants of a family torn apart by tragedy. After days of relentless searching, she finally discovered an address: an old house on the outskirts of the city, where Lily's mother had lived since the fire. Clara's heart raced as she stood before the weathered door, its paint chipped and faded. She hesitated for a moment, fear gripping her, but then knocked firmly. The door creaked open to reveal an elderly woman with weary eyes that held a depth of sorrow Clara could hardly fathom. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Thompson," Clara replied, her voice shaking. "I'm here about your daughter, Lily." The woman's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a profound sadness. "Lily, my sweet Lily." Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped back, inviting Clara inside. As they sat together in the dimly lit living room, Clara shared what she had discovered: the stories of Lily's life and the pain that had lingered in their apartment. Mrs. Thompson listened intently, her face a canvas of emotions as memories flooded back, of laughter shared over art projects, of bedtime stories filled with dreams yet unfulfilled. "I thought I lost her forever," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice breaking. "I never stopped searching, but it felt like she was taken from me without a trace." Clara reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "She's not gone. She's been with me, trying to reach you. She wants you to know that she loves you and that she's okay." As Mrs. Thompson absorbed Clara's words, something shifted in the air, a warmth enveloping them both, as if Lily's spirit were wrapping them in an embrace. The television in Clara's apartment flickered once more, and the whispers grew softer, more serene. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson whispered through tears. "Thank you for bringing her back to me." With each word spoken, the heaviness in Clara's heart began to lift. She realized that by helping Lily find peace, she was also healing herself, confronting her own fears of loneliness and loss. The connection forged between them transcended the boundaries of life and death, intertwining their stories into one narrative of hope. As Clara walked back to her apartment later that evening, she felt lighter than she had in years. The whispers that had once tormented her now echoed with gratitude and love. The television remained silent, as if acknowledging that its purpose had been fulfilled. In the days that followed, Clara transformed her apartment into a sanctuary, a space filled with art and light, where she honored the memories of those who had lived there before. She began painting again, channeling her emotions onto canvas as a tribute to Lily and all the souls who had touched her life. The once ominous whispers became a gentle reminder of connection, of the fragility and beauty of existence. Clara reached out to others in her community, sharing stories and creating bonds that filled the void she had long tried to escape. And as she painted one evening under the soft glow of her lamp, Clara felt a presence beside her, a warmth that enveloped her like a hug from a long-lost friend. She smiled knowingly at the empty space beside her. "Thank you for guiding me," she whispered into the quiet room. The television remained dark and silent, but Clara knew that its whispers would always be with her, echoes of love and loss woven into the fabric of her being. With each stroke of her brush, she honored their stories while embracing her own journey, a journey toward healing and connection that transcended time. In this newfound light, Clara understood that loneliness could be conquered not by shutting oneself away, but by opening one's heart to those who came before and those who would come after. And in doing so, she found not only peace for herself, but also a way to keep the whispers alive, a testament to the enduring power of love that binds us all together through every story told and every soul remembered.